So, first question I had is, when did this COVID thing first get on your radar? When did you first start to notice stuff about the COVID?
This current one,
Mm-hmm.
I only noticed it uh, about a month ago, but I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to it. I didn't imagine that it would be as pandemic as it has been.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I've had some occasions during my life, which we'll probably be talking about, when we had people quarantined for various things, but nothing, of course, on this level at all.
Mm-hmm.
No, all I remember, and I wasn't there because World War One was about 7 years before me, or 8 years, and their flu epidemic was something people talked about for all my life. When I was a kid, especially, that was a common thing that people would refer to because it was so endemic, I guess is a good word to use. Uh, so I don't really know how to explain further how how it how it got my attention.
Okay. So, when did it start to seem to you like, wow, this is a big deal?
Oh, this is April of
Fourth.
4th. Actually, when my three children convinced me that I needed to get out of a of a retirement home where people who are the most accessible to getting the disease, and I didn't think it was all that bad, and I was going to stick it out. I was going to be careful and try to stay away from people and that sort of thing, and certainly not do anything on purpose. But I didn't dream that I would be concerned as I was there a few days just before I moved out here to my daughter's house. Uh, I got the mail out of the mailbox, and I thought, oh my, that's why we have to wash our hands, because some mail clerk just may have sneezed yesterday, and it's transmitted that quickly. It's little things that we don't think that is going to affect our lives could put us in the grave, and especially if you're in your 90s like I am. And so I have tried to be very careful. I don't mind dying, but I'm not looking for it. We cling to life. I remember my father-in-law on his deathbed, how he groaned trying to take one more breath, just one after the other. It seemed like forever.
So, you were talking about your retirement home. How have they responded to this COVID experience?
I thought they were overreacting at first, uh, and they weren't overacting at all at that time compared to what they wound up overacting. And I got the impression that our program director for our retirement home is of people who are supposed to be able to take care of themselves are in three different living units. One is condos that people own their own apartments, and one is an apartment house just like that I lived in, and the other is duplexes, triplexes, and quadruplexes down the hill. Each one of them has a director that's supposed to keep us pleased with life. And I then realized that Latrice, our director, who is a wonderful person on how to try to keep the old people happy, uh, she is not going to let anything happen that could be that the disease, the virus, could be transmitted into our group that she's in charge of, not on her watch. And I got to think, I don't blame her a bit in the world to be worried about like that. And so they are. I was talking to a friend at the retirement home on the phone this morning, And he says, well, I can still, he lives in the apartment, one of the duplexes. He says, I can still go door to door here in the place with no restrictions, but I don't know how long that'll be. But they have restrictions. Uh, they had weekly bingo games. Uh, they would have tables of 4. This is before the virus, and many of the tables would have 2 or 3 other people scooting chairs up and got their bingo cards on the corners, and it was crowded. That bingo is something everybody seemed to know how to play, and so it always had a crowd. But before I left there, I walked through the atrium where ordinarily there are 6 large 4-sided tables. They had removed 2 of them to where there are only 4 of those tables, and there would be only 2 people at each table for the bingo game. So now we're talking about the bingo game was down to 2, 4, 6, 8 people plus the number caller, who the number caller was our activity director. And so she decided she would have each series of games with a group, but no larger than what I described, and whatever it took to keep people happy. So they are, in the motel apartment house where I lived, I could have meals, if I wanted to pay for them, delivered to me, and they would give me a menu each week, and I'd name what I wanted, and I could have it delivered, or I could prepare my own. After the virus hit, the cafeteria closed. So far as eating in the cafeteria, there is no more of that, but the menu is passed out. The people in the condos got their meals, their monthly stipend they pay included 2 meals a day for the entire month. And of course they would go to the dining room, but no more. They fill out a menu each week saying what all they want each one of the days, and they're all delivered to their apartments. And those of us in the apartment building or the other residential quarters can have them delivered, as many as they want to if they filled out the card. So the meal is going to be your own meal in your own apartment, is the only way that they'll deliver, that they'll serve.
How all has your life changed since this COVID stuff started?
While it was before I moved out of my apartment to my daughter's house here, I didn't feel much about it. I just was careful about things. In fact, didn't get very careful until that thought came to me when I got the mail out of my mailbox about how easily I was learning that the virus is transmitted. And up until then, it just didn't bother me, and I could handle it. But after that, it was on my mind, and I was always careful. And I'd never been a big hand washer, but boy, I got to be one after I thought about how easily it's transmitted just on a piece of mail, junk mail at that. And so then I became more careful. The thought about wearing a mask didn't cross my mind. I was careful not to be too close to people, though if I were walking down the hall, I didn't worry about staying 6 feet apart. But if I met somebody, I just went ahead. I didn't hold my breath or anything like that. Now, here at my daughter's house, I don't even get outside to go to get anything I want. If she brings me something that is purchased from a store somewhere, I wash my hands after I get it. And if it has a wrapper on it, I'll get that wrapper off of it and then wash my hands. If I can't get the wrapper off of it, then I want to wash my hands each time I handle it, but I don't remember to do that much. Uh, there's a limit to an old person's minds.
Okay. What are your biggest concerns considering this virus?
My wife has always been a person who's very lonely, and she had always, over the years, made me promise that I would outlive her, that she would die first. So I've tried to do that. My biggest concern is to be here for her. That's my only reason for living personally. I'm ready to go. Anything is better than this.
Okay, so what other big historical events do you remember having such an impact on your life?
When I think about diseases and things like that, the things that come to my mind are when I was a child, not in school yet, and scarlet fever was something that people got. I had no idea what it was. I just knew that that was a fearful thing. And people, if a person in a home down the street from us, which there were 2 or 3 of them in my block, had scarlet fever, they had a sign on the door, quarantined, scarlet fever, stay away. And that scared the life out of me. I'd make a big circle past those houses. And that's about all that affected me on that. After I was in school, I would guess probably in the 3rd grade, I got the measles. And I didn't know the measles were all that bad. But I found out, well, I cannot go outside the house. Well, and I can't even have the blinds open on my bedroom window, because too much light is bad for you if you have the measles. So I was restricted to my bedroom with the curtains drawn. I would peek out when they weren't watching. And I never lost any sight, so far as I know, but that is a memory of mine. When I was in the service in Italy, I was in a replacement depot. We weren't anywhere near battles, but we were in this huge place of tents, soldiers waiting to be assigned to somewhere in battle. And they kept us with busy work, and among other things, we did a lot of walks or marches or whatever you want to call them. And we would go, say, 100 feet away from wooded areas that would have signs warning malaria. And that's the first time I learned what malaria was. And some of the guys got a small degree of malaria. In fact, when I was later in the hospital, there were some of them in there that had malaria, and I found out what that is, and it's something you don't want. But it was transmitted by mosquito bites, they found out. I don't know how scarlet fever and measles are transmitted. I think sort of like what the COVID-19 is, if you breathe wrong. But well, I ran out of what to say about that. Sorry.
That's fine. No, thanks. So I've heard some people say this may spur a second Great Depression. What do you think of that?
Having lived through the first Great Depression, I remember as a kid, before I got into school, we lived on a corner street in Amarillo, Texas, and I could see people walking down the street by the side of our house. They would have a sack with, I didn't realize it, but what was in it? In it was about a quart-size coffee can. And I asked Mother, what are those people doing? And she says, they're going to the soup kitchen. And what they were doing was going to the place where they could get a free container of soup or whatever they had for food that they give away. And I think Mother said something that caught my attention, was that they put it in the sack, carrying it in sack because they don't want people to know they're going to the soup kitchen, but you can tell that's where they're going. We were fortunate that we were among the wealthy people there. Dad had a full-time job and that was good pay. He was a railroad person, and so we didn't go to the soup kitchens. In fact, my mother kept sandwich materials for we called them bums or hobos that would knock on the door wanting something to eat. And I learned later that since we lived so close to the railroad tracks, that various guys who were trying to go to California or wherever to find work, they would ride the boxcars, the freight trains, and they'd stop at a place like Amarillo. And we were 7 blocks from the railroads, and I didn't realize it, but they had our house marked that you ask for food here, you're going to get some food. So Mother wouldn't let them come in the house. She would give them their plate with their sandwich or whatever it is. All I remember is sandwiches. And they would sit on the back steps, and I'd go out there and sit down beside them. And it was interesting for them to tell me the stories of where they're going and where they came from, and whatever they wanted to say was, they made it interesting for a kid. Since everybody was poor, we didn't think anything about having holes in the knees of our trousers. Everybody had them. And one of my friends in grade school not only had holes in the knees of his trousers, he was always barefooted. And he was the only kid that was always barefooted. And didn't think too much about it. Kind of felt sorry for him because he couldn't have shoes. The rest of us had holes in our shoes, and we'd get a piece of cardboard and put it inside our shoes to cover it up for a half a day before it gets worn off. A lot of little things like that. Everybody shared with the shortages that we as families had to put up with, and I feel like I was one of the rich kids because I was real lucky, but I did have holes in my shoes and holes in my knees. But Mother would patch the knees on my pants, so I had patches on my knees. My best friend, who lived 2 doors away, his father had a little barber shop 2 blocks over on Fillmore Street, and that's where I went to the barber shop. This has nothing to do with being poor, but it was during that time. His shop was a small one-room building with a big glass window in the front, as you would have on a storefront. And so as I sat in the barber chair, I could see out on Fillmore Street, and there was a hardware store across the street. And I don't recall what brought up the subject, but Mr. Hardin says, yeah, he says, I looked out there one day and I noticed this lady leaning against the front fender of her car. And after a while, this guy came out of the hardware store, and they both got in the car and a Ford Roadster and drove off. And I recognized them. That was Bonnie and Clyde. And that was exciting to me. I was a teenager and they were romantic. But they they knew what the Depression was like, and they made a living by robbing.
Okay, so do you think there's a chance that this could lead to another depression?
Oh, back to that. So far as a depression as a result of this, part of my thoughts to address that goes back to what was the name of the head of the Teamsters Union that disappeared, and they have never found his body. Can't think of it off the top of my head. Anyway, he had called a quit work. What in the world's that called?
Strike, right? A strike?
A strike of the truck drivers. And that I was in the high school at that time, and I got to thinking about that. Wow, here in the city of Amarillo, which wasn't all that big a city, it was 22,000. But if we didn't have trucks carrying food into Amarillo, we wouldn't be getting much food. In fact, if suddenly they striked, our shelves are going to be empty in the stores. And I'm lucky to live in this area where the farms are close by. Those people down in the Metroplex, I didn't know what to call it that then, I just said in Big D, they'd really be hard up for something to eat just because of the lack of transportation. Now then, this is more than that, and they're feeling, our leaders, nation leaders, are feeling their way along to try to survive it, and they know that one of these days we'll be coming out of it, but they really don't know how can we get the economy to be rolling along again, get all the people back to their jobs and all of that. I'm kind of glad I'm 94 years old. No, I'm not wishing it off on you younger folks, but I think that we're all going, especially you younger folks that didn't live through what little I've realized about the Great Depression. I'm afraid you're going to learn the hard way what that was like. And whether you're rich or poor, you're going to be poor. I hope for the best. And actually, there are amazing things that our government is able to do, and I never dreamed that there would be $1,200 a piece or whatever it is just handed out to everybody that doesn't make over $150,000 a year or whatever it is. There are a lot of things our government's able to do that will take a lot of the sting off of it, but they can't solve all our problems, and especially those folks that are working, making a living by serving others, such as the waiter and waitress that's living on tips, and all the people that are serving others. The business is going to have to get some income coming in before they can pay them to get there to serve others. So it's going to take a lot of things, people a lot smarter than I am, to figure out how to get all of those things to dovetail and build the economy back. And I pray for you.
Well, I was going to ask, what do you think of how all this has been handled, but you kind of addressed that. Is there anything more to say on what you think about how this has been handled?
Well, I was surprised about the things that they're able to do that I think are probably taking the edge off of it, and may take the edge off of it all the way along. But even with the edge off of it, it's going to be hardship. There will be hardships. I'm convinced of that. Of course, I'm one of those pessimists from the deep depression back there, and there's no way for us survivors of that to describe it, for people to understand it nowadays, because we've had such a wonderful economy. And even in our hardships we've had several years, it was still a good, strong economy. Even when I remember I was in my own business that I owned. It was a struggle to make things meet when we would have those short, depressive years, and I felt like they were worse than they were, having living with them. And looking back, they weren't bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw a documentary one time on the Great Depression. They said it wasn't how long it was that made it so bad, it was just that we didn't know when it was going to end.
Right.
What role did... Huh?
Take a break.
Yeah. Last question. I've been thinking about Christians' role in this. What role do you think Christians should be playing during this COVID situation? Because, we feel like there's a need to help, but we can't make in-person contact, so...
Well, I'm thinking mostly of this shortage I think we're going to be facing. And I remember during the Depression, like I say, Dad had a regular job that paid well, and when Mother would fix our Sunday noon meals, that barber I was talking about, they had an outhouse behind their house, and I didn't realize that was as poor as I thought that. I didn't realize they were that poor. But anyway, Mother would, any time there was anything significant left over, and in fact, she would put stuff with it and carry it down to their houses, down to their house. I think we should be watching for the hardships that our neighbors are having. And you don't ask, is there anything I can do for you? Figure out some little something you can do. It doesn't take much. If we look through the Bible, when the young man, I believe he was a rich young ruler, asked Christ, what must I do? And Christ said, well, obey the law. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy might, and love thy neighbor as yourself, and keep the commandments. And he says, well, I've done those all my life. And he says, well, all right, if you've done everything else you can do, just go on out and sell all your property and give it to the poor. And the poor guy, that was more than he could handle, and he walked off. But the reason I bring that up is, throughout the entire Bible, we have commands that are tangible and we can do or not do them. But there is that thing called love, that when Jesus was talking to that man, he told him that love your neighbor as yourself, and loving God is the foundation of all of the commands in the Old Testament. And so if you do that, you're doing it all. And that same message of love is emphasized throughout the New Testament, that this world is living on love. And so watch for things that you can do for one another. Me too. You might do something for me. How about that? I'm ready for you. But seriously, meditate on that. And when you lay your head on the pillow at night, think back on the day and think of the things that you could do better tomorrow. you'll have a better life and you'll be happy.
Thanks, Tom.